The confirmation came on a Friday afternoon, a statement from the Lexington County Coroner's Office. A name, an age, a body found in a wooded area off Old Cherokee Road, now officially identified as Elena Catherine Moore, 39 years old, personal trainer, wife, member of a South Carolina community that had spent 6 days holding its breath. And then, 3 days after that identification, on June 22, 2026, the autopsy results dropped. And instead of answers, the only thing the Medical University of South Carolina could tell the world was this. The examination found no evidence of traumatic injury. No bruising, no lacerations, no gunshot wounds, no stab wounds, no blunt force trauma, no strangulation, no other external injuries. Cause of death, pending. Toxicology, pending. Histological studies, pending. Everything that matters, pending. A woman is dead. The state's major crimes unit is investigating, and science cannot yet tell us why she died. That is where this case stands on June 26, 2026. And it is one of the most unsettling places a case like this can stand, because it means every question that has been building since June 11th remains open. Every theory, every concern, every account from the people who knew Elena Moore and watched her change in the weeks before she disappeared. None of it has been confirmed. None of it has been ruled out. The truth is still somewhere inside a laboratory in Charleston, being processed alongside weeks of grief and public speculation, and a community that needs to understand what happened to a woman it knew. That is what this video is. Not a conclusion, not a verdict. A full, careful accounting of everything that is documented and confirmed, everything that is being reported by named individuals to credible outlets, and everything that investigators are now quietly working to resolve. Because Elena Catherine Moore deserves that accounting, and the people following this case deserve to understand it completely. If you are new to True Crime Vault, this is exactly what we do here. We cover real cases with real evidence, and we do not fill gaps with comfortable assumptions. We follow the facts to wherever they go, and when we do not have answers, we say so directly. If that approach is what you have been looking for, subscribe right now and hit the notification bell. New developments in this case will come, and when they do, we will cover them fully. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I want to know what you make of everything we are about to walk through together. Now, before we talk about the investigation, before we talk about the autopsy, before we talk about the two voices that are now publicly disagreeing about what Elena Moore's final weeks actually mean, we need to go back to the beginning, not to June 11th. Further than that, Elena Catherine Moore grew up in South Carolina. She built her life in Lexington, a town of roughly 23,000 people sitting just west of Columbia, the kind of place where people notice each other, where a familiar face in the gym or behind a bar or across a pharmacy counter becomes part of the texture of daily life. Elena was woven into that texture from multiple directions at once. She worked as a personal trainer at Wolf's Fitness Center, where her clients saw her regularly and counted on her to show up. She worked as a pharmacy technician at CVS, where she was part of the routine of people's health care. She bartended at multiple venues across Lexington, which means that even on evenings and weekends, she was present and visible and known. 3 separate communities of people, 3 sets of faces that expected to see hers. 3 different contexts in which her absence would be felt immediately. She was 5'7", brown hair, brown eyes, 120 pounds. She was also, by every account from the people who knew her, someone who showed up. Not just physically, but emotionally. The kind of person who would be there when you needed her. The kind of person who, as her closest friend would later say on national television, was a strong-minded individual who lifts everyone around her. Elena had been with Brannon Slice for over 13 years, long enough to have watched each other grow through their 30s, long enough to have had the kinds of conversations you only have with someone who has known you across different versions of yourself. They made it official in 2024, married, less than 2 years before Elena walked out of Planet Fitness and into the June evening that ended her life. And here is something important about this specific period of their relationship. The friends who knew Elena before she disappeared are now describing the marriage in ways that did not make the early news coverage. Not as a happy chapter at the end of a long love story, but as something more complicated. something in motion, something that may have been unraveling in the same window of time that everything else in Elena's visible world was also changing. But before we get to that, we need to understand the shape of what was happening to Elena in the weeks leading up to June 11th, because that shape is the most important thing in this entire case. It started with silence. Her friend, Lauren Beasley, told Fox News Digital that Elena was very active on social media before her disappearance. Active not in the passive sense of scrolling, but in the engaged sense of posting, responding, being present in her online community, which is not surprising for a fitness trainer whose visibility was part of her professional identity. And then, approximately 1 month before she disappeared, that presence simply stopped. No posts, no engagement, no presence at all. For a woman Beasley described as consistently active online, a month of unexplained silence was not subtle. It was a signal. Beasley noticed. Other friends noticed. The absence was loud. Now, we have recently learned, through posts obtained by TMZ from a private secondary Instagram account that Elena's close circle was apparently not aware of, that the silence on her public accounts was not the same as silence everywhere. While Elena went quiet in the spaces people could see, she was writing privately. And what she was writing stretches back further than anyone initially reported. A post from December 2025 described what she called a dehumanizing heartbreak. A post from March 2026 talked about the war being over, about feeling genuinely free, about the anxiety that had been boiling inside her finally being gone. And then in May 2026, weeks before she told her best friend she was scared for her life, she wrote about someone who had let her destroy herself, about an exhausting hatred sitting in her chest, about love turned painful and memories that would not leave. These posts did not name anyone. They cannot be used to establish cause or fault or intent, but they are a window into the internal world of a woman who was clearly carrying something heavy for months, something she felt she could only express in a private space that the people around her could not see. And that combination, the public silence and the private pain, is one of the most important pieces of context for everything that followed. On May 31, 2026, Elena Catherine Moore attended a group brunch in Lexington. One of the people at that table was Sandra Rachel Campbell, a woman who has known Elena for over a decade. By Sandra's own description, they were the kind of close where you tell each other everything. And Sandra has now told Elena's story in interviews with Fox News Digital, TMZ, and News Nation, because she believes the world needs to understand what she witnessed that day. At that brunch, Elena's behavior was unusual from the moment she sat down. She kept getting up from her seat, moving toward the window, looking outside, not casually, not the way you do when you are bored or distracted, watching, tracking, as if she was aware of something outside that the other women at the table could not see. The other women noticed. Sandra noticed, but the setting was not the right one for that conversation. Sandra was not close with the other women present, and the table was not the place for whatever needed to be said. At the end of the brunch, as the women were leaving, Elena pulled Sandra aside, just the two of them, and she told her, plainly and directly, that she was scared for her life. She could not get into the details right then. There were too many people, but she said they needed to talk one-on-one. She said she would explain everything. She said, later. Later, for Sandra Campbell, came in the form of a missed phone call on June 4th. Elena called. Sandra did not pick up. She called back. No answer. She sent a text. Nothing. And that silence, the last silence between two old friends, is the one that Sandra has been living inside ever since. Now, June 4th, 2026 is also the day something else happened. Something that, when footage was released publicly on June 16th, became the single most discussed piece of evidence in this entire case. About a half-mile from the Planet Fitness at 560 Whiteford Way in Lexington, a couple named Sarah Burleson and John Moore, no relation to Elena, had a Ring doorbell camera running. A DoorDash driver dropped a food delivery at their door. Before John Moore could reach it, Elena Moore appeared on camera. She walked up, picked up the bag, and began examining the receipt as though the order was hers. John opened the door and took the bag back, and then when he turned to go inside, Elena followed him. She walked directly toward the open door of a stranger's apartment as though it was her own home. John Moore described what he observed in that moment with precision. She seemed genuinely confused and disoriented, he said. Not about the food, not about the door, but about where she was and what she was doing there. Not all there, as he put it. Sarah Burleson added a second account from the same period. She saw Elena going through packages left outside a neighbor's apartment. When she asked Elena what she was doing, Elena told her she had no idea. Sarah Burleson's instinct in that moment was not to dismiss what she saw as a simple misunderstanding. She told NBC affiliate WIS that Elena's confusion worried her in a specific and forward-looking way. She said, if she was confused like that a week before she went missing, was she in that same state of confusion the night she went into the woods? That question is the spine of the entire investigation. Henry Dukes, a private investigator and personal acquaintance of Brennan Slice, who was brought in to work the case from the family's side, reviewed the doorbell footage and the witness accounts, and told News Nation that what had been documented suggested an extended period of disorientation, not something that started recently. He described it as possibly related to mental health. A source close to the investigation told News Nation separately that Elena had recently been released from a mental health facility before her disappearance. That detail has not been officially confirmed by law enforcement, but it is being reported, and in the context of everything else that was documented in those final weeks, it is a detail that cannot simply be set aside. 1 week after the doorbell footage was recorded, on Thursday, June 11, 2026, Elena Catherine Moore signed into the Planet Fitness at 560 Whiteford Way in Lexington at approximately 6:40 in the evening. The check-in was routine, nothing flagged. She had no vehicle with her at the gym. At some point after entering, she left on foot. Surveillance footage captured her walking away from the facility toward the wooded area behind the Lowe's home improvement store that shares the shopping center. And then, for 2 hours and 37 minutes, the cameras lost her. No confirmed footage, no phone signal. Police indicated that despite believing she had her phone, carrier information was not immediately available, and by the following Monday, her phone had stopped pinging entirely. 2 hours and 37 minutes in a suburban South Carolina town in the early evening, and nothing. No record of where she was, what she was doing, or who, if anyone, she encountered. At 9:17 that evening, a camera at the Publix parking lot at 100 Old Cherokee Road picked her up again. Olive green zip-up hoodie, black athletic pants. Same outfit as the Planet Fitness footage. She was on foot, moving in the direction of Old Cherokee Road, walking with what appeared to be purpose, though what that purpose was and whether she was lucid enough to be acting with genuine intent in that moment, the footage cannot answer. And then, after that 9:17 image, the cameras ran out again, and this time permanently. The following morning, June 12th, Brennan Slice reported his wife missing to the Lexington Police Department. He also located her vehicle that same day, parked in the Lowe's lot near the gym, where the surveillance window had opened the night before. Elena had driven to the area and then walked away from her car on foot. That vehicle was sitting in a parking lot while she disappeared into the June dark. What followed in the days between June 12th and June 17th was a multi-agency search operation that generated national media coverage and the kind of community engagement that only comes when a case feels personal to a town. Lexington Police Department deployed drones over the wooded area behind Lowe's and Planet Fitness on June 13th. Nothing found. On Monday, June 15th, a coordinated ground search involved Lexington Police, the Lexington County Sheriff's Department, SLED, the Department of Natural Resources, SC Highway Patrol, Fire Services, EMS, and other emergency response agencies. They covered the area behind Lowe's tree by tree, house by house. Chief Terrence Green was careful to describe it not as a recovery operation, but as a methodical effort to rule out a location. The official result, no trace of Elena Moore was found. Then came the moment that tested the community's patience and confidence in the investigation simultaneously. The Lexington Police Department's social media account was edited to indicate that Elena had been found. The community exhaled, and then the post was corrected, almost immediately. It was a false lead. A mistake. She had not been found, and the frustration that had already been building around the pace of the investigation, particularly around questions of whether the full surveillance corridor between Planet Fitness and Publix had been canvassed quickly enough in those first critical days, sharpened into something harder. But the media coverage was working. Chief Green would later confirm that directly, crediting the department's media partners explicitly for generating hundreds of tips and leads throughout the case. And it was a tip, a single community member who came forward on the evening of June 16th, that broke this case open. That person told police they had seen Elena Moore entering the woods in the area near Lakeside Middle School, off Old Cherokee Road and North Lake Drive, on the night she disappeared. On June 17th at 1:30 in the afternoon, officers and fire personnel moved into that wooded area. Residents of the Berkshire subdivision watched from their driveways as streets were blocked and traffic was rerouted. At 2:48 in the afternoon, the search stopped. A body, clothing matching exactly, olive green zip-up hoodie, black athletic pants. Chief Terrence Green and Sheriff Jay Kuhn stepped to a podium. Green's words were measured and precise. At approximately 2:48 in the afternoon, we found an unidentified body that fits the clothing description of our missing person. A reporter asked directly, "Is foul play suspected?" Chief Green did not say no. He said it was an active investigation and that SLED, South Carolina's Major Crimes Unit, had been called in to conduct the death investigation. And that answer, or more specifically that non-answer, told everyone paying attention exactly what they needed to know about how law enforcement was reading this scene. On June 19th, the Lexington County Coroner's Office officially confirmed the identification. The body found near Old Cherokee Road and North Lake Drive was Elena Catherine Moore, 39 years old. The community that had been hoping against the obvious exhaled again, this time with grief instead of relief. And a memorial began to grow on Old Cherokee Road. Flowers and candles and handwritten notes from people who had trained with her, poured drinks beside her, recognized her face across a counter, from strangers who had followed the case and felt the weight of it anyway. On June 20th, the autopsy was conducted at the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston. And on June 22nd, Coroner Margaret Fisher released the findings that restructured everything people thought they understood about this case. The autopsy did not identify an immediate cause of death, no evidence of traumatic injury, no bruising, no lacerations, no gunshot wounds, no stab wounds, no blunt force trauma, no strangulation, no other external injuries. Additional evaluation required: histological studies, meaning tissue analysis at the cellular level, review of medical records, full toxicology testing. No further information to be released until all pending studies are complete, and a forensic pathologist can determine both cause and manner of death. Now let's be very clear about what that actually means, because it has been widely misread in both directions. The absence of external injuries does not close any door. It does not confirm natural causes. It does not rule out anything that the internet has been discussing since this case went national. There are multiple pathways to death that leave no visible external mark, and determining which of those pathways applies requires exactly the testing that is currently underway. Toxicology screening can detect substances in a person's system that would not appear in any visual examination. Prescription medications, other compounds, anything that was in Elena's body on June 11th that should not have been there or was present at unusual levels. Histological studies examine tissue under a microscope at the cellular level and can reveal damage or changes that are invisible to the naked eye, including cellular patterns consistent with certain types of exposure or medical events. And the review of medical records will give investigators and pathologists a comprehensive picture of Elena's physical and mental health history, which is essential context for interpreting everything else the laboratory finds. The coroner's office has said explicitly that no further information will be released until these studies are complete. That timeline, given the complexity of extended toxicology panels and histological analysis, is weeks at minimum. The waiting period that this case is currently in is not a sign of delay or obstruction. It is the forensic process working the way it is supposed to work when the stakes are this high. Now let's talk about the two voices that have been most present in the public discourse around this case, because they represent something genuinely important. They represent the disagreement about what Elena's final weeks mean, and that disagreement is not going to resolve itself before the laboratory results come back. Sandra Rachel Campbell has appeared on News Nation, spoken to Fox News Digital, and spoken to TMZ. She has been consistent and specific across every appearance. She told Chris Cuomo on News Nation directly she believed there was foul play. She said her friend was struggling for her life and was literally afraid for her life. She described significant issues in the marriage between Elena and Brandon Slice and said the two were trying to separate at the time of Elena's disappearance. She recounted a specific incident, without elaborating on details, where she and Elena were unable to attend a concert together because of something Slice did. She said she had witnessed troubling behavior from him. And she said Elena's behavior on May 31st, the watching, the scanning, the fear she expressed, was not the behavior of a woman in a standard mental health crisis. It was the behavior of a woman who believed something specific was threatening her. Henry Dukes disagrees, publicly and directly. Henry Dukes is a private investigator based in Columbia, South Carolina. He was brought in to work on the case, and he is also a personal acquaintance of Brandon Slice. Dukes told News Nation that Slice is grieving, that Slice planned to spend the rest of his life with Elena, that the two of them had built something together over 13 years and that Slice was doing everything he could throughout the search. Dukes described Slice as very distraught, very upset, very emotional. He said he found absolutely no red flags in his conversations with Slice throughout the investigation. And when Sandra Campbell's public statements came out, the claims about marital issues, the allegations of foul play, the account of Elena's fear, Dukes pushed back with notable directness. He told News Nation that he disagreed with Campbell and that she did not know the facts of the case. He noted that if she was truly as close to Elena as she claimed, law enforcement would have already spoken to her. He said she had no factual information to provide, and then he said something that a lot of people noticed. He told her, on camera, that she needed to do what everybody else was doing and stay in her lane. That exchange matters, not because it tells us what happened to Elena Moore, it does not, but because it illustrates the fundamental tension at the center of this case. On one side, a woman who has known Elena Moore for over a decade, who sat across from her 11 days before she disappeared, who heard specific words from Elena's own mouth about being afraid, and who is now saying publicly that those words meant something specific. On the other side, a professional investigator who has direct access to the husband, who has found no red flags, and who is actively challenging the credibility of Elena's closest friend's account. Both of those people are named. Both of them are speaking on record. And both of them cannot be entirely right. But the instrument that will actually resolve their disagreement is not a television interview or a comment section or a true crime video. It is the toxicology results currently processing in Charleston. Former FBI agent Jennifer Coffin-Daffer addressed this tension directly on News Nation, and her framing is worth sitting with. She said that Elena having serious mental health struggles, having problems in her marriage, being concerned about her safety, and also experiencing genuine mental breaks are not mutually exclusive. These are not opposite explanations that cancel each other out. A person can be navigating all of those things simultaneously. The anxiety that Lauren Beasley said Elena had always dealt with, the relationship difficulties that Sandra Campbell described, the fear that Elena expressed at that brunch, the disorientation captured on a stranger's doorbell camera. None of these things are incompatible with each other. They can all be true at the same time, and they can each point toward different explanations for what happened on June 11th. Coffin-Daffer also made a specific evidentiary point about the night Elena disappeared. When Elena walked into that wooded area, no one followed her on camera. The phone was not pinging. The surveillance in the area showed nothing following her in. She said it would be a significant leap to conclude that someone walked into those woods and committed a crime based on what has been publicly released. That is not the same as saying foul play is impossible. It is saying that the evidence in the public record does not yet support that conclusion, and drawing that conclusion ahead of the forensic evidence is not the same as pursuing justice for Elena. It is something else. The Lexington Police Department has stated on the record, through Inspector Missy Silcox in an interview with Newsweek, that Brannon Slice is not a person of interest at the current moment. That is a law enforcement assessment based on the information available to investigators, and it is the accurate representation of where the official investigation stands as of today, June 26, 2026. That status can change. It has changed before in cases that looked simpler on the surface than they were. But it is the documented fact, and it matters. There is one more piece of this case that deserves careful attention before we close, and it is the piece that almost nobody is talking about loudly enough. If the reporting is accurate that Elena may have been released from a mental health facility on or around June 11th, the very day she signed into Planet Fitness for the last time, then the question of what happened that day before 6:40 p.m. is one that investigators are almost certainly examining in detail. Who signed the discharge? Into whose care was she released? Was there a safety plan? Was anyone contacted? Was anyone with her in the hours between a potential discharge and her appearance at that gym? And if she was in a state of significant cognitive disruption, as the doorbell footage from 1 week earlier suggested, how was the determination made that she was ready to re-enter daily life without a support structure in place? These are not questions that assign blame to any individual. They are systemic questions about what the standard of care looks like for someone in acute crisis. And they are questions that the medical records review currently underway as part of this investigation will be bringing directly into the picture. Because here is the thing about mental health crises and about the vulnerability they create. Whether what happened to Elena Moore on June 11th was a tragic medical or psychiatric event, or whether it was something more deliberately harmful, the fact that she was visibly disoriented on a stranger's doorbell camera 1 week before she disappeared, and that no intervention sufficient to protect her occurred in that week, is itself a kind of failure, not necessarily a criminal failure, not necessarily anyone's fault in a legal sense, but a failure in the network of care and attention that should have existed around a woman in crisis. Sarah Burleson said it most clearly. She saw Elena confused and disoriented. It worried her, but she did not know who to call. That gap between recognizing that someone is in trouble and knowing what to do about it is not a gap unique to Lexington, South Carolina. It exists everywhere. And Elena Moore's case is now one of the cases that forces us to look at it directly. As of today, June 26, 2026, here is what we know with certainty. Elena Catherine Moore, 39 years old, personal trainer, pharmacy technician, bartender, wife, member of a community that is still grieving her, was confirmed dead by the Lexington County Coroner's Office on June 19, 2026. Her body was found on June 17th in a wooded area near Lakeside Middle School off Old Cherokee Road in Lexington County, South Carolina. The preliminary autopsy, conducted June 20th at the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston, found no evidence of traumatic external injury and identified no immediate cause of death. Toxicology testing, histological studies, and a medical records review are pending. SLED is conducting the death investigation. Brannon Slice is not a person of interest. No charges have been filed. No manner of death has been determined. Everything else remains open. The community of Lexington is living in that openness right now. The memorial on Old Cherokee Road has grown steadily since the body was found. Flowers and candles and notes from people who recognized Elena's face in the gym, or across a bar or behind a pharmacy counter. From people who never met her but understood from the shape of this story that something important happened here, and that it should not be allowed to fade. Heather Russell, who was among the first to leave flowers at the memorial, told a local news station that she remembered Elena from Planet Fitness as always smiling, always bubbly. She said she came to pay her respects and to hope that the people responsible for answering the question of how Elena died would see the obligation of that responsibility through. Mindy Miller, who had known Elena since she was 18 years old, spoke near the site where Elena was found and called the discovery absolutely devastating. She said things like this do not happen in Lexington. And then she said something that applies to every person watching this video. Anyone who knew her would see that something about this does not add up. That is not a legal conclusion. It is not forensic evidence. It is the statement of someone who knew a specific person well enough to know that the story as it currently exists is incomplete. The story as it currently exists is incomplete. That is the honest summary of where this case stands. The cause of Elena Moore's death is unknown. The manner of her death has not been classified. The investigation is active and ongoing, and the people who loved her are waiting for an accounting that has not yet arrived. What we owe her is the same thing we owe every person at the center of a case like this: the insistence that the investigation be thorough, that the results, when they come, be made public and explained completely, that if there is accountability to be found, it be pursued with the full weight of what SLED brings to its work, and that in the meantime, we do not manufacture certainty we do not have, because false certainty in both directions, toward any particular explanation before the evidence supports it, is a disservice to Elena Moore and to the people who are waiting for the truth. Evidence speaks, and in this case, it is still speaking. The toxicology will come back. The histological studies will resolve. The medical records will provide context. And when those results arrive, True Crime Vault will be here to cover them fully, carefully, and with the same commitment to accuracy that this case demands. If you have any information relevant to Elena Moore's death, SLED is the lead agency. You can reach them at 803-737-9000 or by email at tipsisled.sc.gov. If this video gave you a clearer picture of where this case actually stands, not where the internet wants it to stand, but where the documented evidence currently places it, share it with someone who has been following Elena's story. Hit the like button, subscribe if you have not already, and leave your thoughts in the comments. This is a case that is going to develop significantly in the weeks ahead. You should already be here when it does. No individual discussed in this video has been charged with any crime in connection with Elena Moore's death. All persons are presumed innocent. This video is based exclusively on publicly available reporting, official statements from the Lexington Police Department, the Lexington County Coroner's Office, and SLED, and documented accounts from named individuals speaking to credible news organizations. There is something else worth naming before this video ends, and it is something that tends to get lost in the noise of true crime coverage when a case is still breaking. It is the question of what the 2-hour and 37-minute gap between 6:40 p.m. and 9:17 p.m. on June 11th actually represents in human terms. 2 hours and 37 minutes. That is not a brief window. That is a long stretch of time in a suburban American town on a Thursday evening in June. The streets are lit, businesses are open, people are out, and Elena Catherine Moore was moving through that environment, on foot with no vehicle, with a phone that may or may not have been functional, in a state that, based on everything documented about the week before, raises serious questions about her orientation and her capacity to make decisions about her own safety. Where did she go in those hours? News Nation noted there was also footage of Elena near a Kohl's in the area that evening, a detail that has not received much coverage, but extends the picture of her movement through that corridor. The initial missing person report listed her last known location as the CVS at 5608 Sunset Boulevard, before being corrected to Planet Fitness. Did she stop somewhere between those locations? Was there an interaction the cameras missed? Was there a moment in those 2.5 hours where something happened that would explain how a woman who signed into a gym at 6:40 ended up in the woods hours later? These are the questions that SLED is working backward through right now, frame by frame, through surveillance footage that has not been released to the public, through statements from people who may have seen Elena in those hours and may not yet know that what they saw is relevant. The canvassing of the Berkshire subdivision that SLED agents conducted on the afternoon of June 17th, going door to door with photographs of Elena, asking residents if they had seen her, was not a formality. It was an active, urgent attempt to reconstruct a timeline that still has significant gaps in it. The tip that led investigators to Elena's body came from someone who had seen her on June 11th, in that specific area, heading into those specific woods. That person came forward 5 days after Elena disappeared, prompted by the media coverage that Chief Green later credited directly. 5 days, which means that for 5 days someone in that community carried knowledge that would have sent investigators to the right location, and the only thing that prompted them to come forward was seeing Elena's face on a screen. That is not a criticism of that person. People do not always immediately connect what they see with the missing persons reports circulating around them. But it is a reminder that in cases like this, the information that breaks things open is rarely held by law enforcement. It is held by ordinary people who went about their Wednesday and their Thursday not knowing that what they saw on a Tuesday evening was the last sighting of a woman who would never come home. Elena Moore trained people. She helped them get stronger in the most physical sense of the word. She showed up for her clients on days when she was herself struggling, according to her friends. She had a life that was full and visible and embedded in a community that is still adjusting to the shape of her absence. And somewhere between signing into a gym at 6:40 in the evening and a body found 6 days later in the woods 2 miles away, something happened that the people who loved her need to understand. They are waiting. The community of Lexington is waiting. And True Crime Vault will be here when the answers come.